All right, Greg, good morning. Recording this again on a Friday morning. How could let everyone know what the current temp is where you're at?
20 below. So I've had
I,
to use these remote lights this
yeah.
morning because the regular switch lights that have lights on the outside walls won't work. It's so cold, the electrical
Oh
current
my
won't allow the
gosh.
switch to come on.
So
So,
you keep sending me photos in the morning of like whatever the temperature
yep.
gauge is in the FJ, and then finally today I'm like, all right, it's still going down. Like I think this thing is just broken. Like,
Listen, this is the first time in a long time that the garage is 32. So I've had to turn the remote heaters on because everything
oh
at 32 is going to
yeah,
freeze. My paint, the
yeah,
weed killer, whatever the hell I got in my garage, the fentanyl,
yeah. The
whatever I have in
fentanyl, the
my
meth,
garage. Exactly.
all
But
of that.
and we're laughing about that. That's called gallows humor, folks. But
Yeah.
the idea is that I love my wife, and I'm afraid of her.
Yeah,
So every morning
let's
before
be
she
honest.
drives, I pull her truck out and warm it up,
Yeah.
and it's amazing because that's where the photo is taken.
Yeah.
Parked right outside, so it's like
Well,
holy
that's
shit.
yeah, you've got
And we got the weather center too in the
yeah, you do. You
backyard.
got the
So I
whole
mean, we
you got
correct
the you got
eh,
the whole thing there, the whole setup to know.
the
I just
wolf
thought
wolf
it's
feeding station, the bear
so
attack first aid
eh,
station.
today's episode
Yeah,
I want to get into kind of something we've talked about before. We talk about it in class sometimes when we're teaching in person. We've talked about it indirectly on different episodes, but it's about what we call chasing TTPs. So chasing tactics, techniques, and procedures, and
yep.
what it is, and how we are constantly updating ours, and we're reacting off of what new thing is happening on the street. So I'll give sort of my explanation
Sure.
of what I think about this, and I'll start with a story, and it's just a very simple way to kind of highlight what I'm talking about. And it was started from a long time ago in Al-Anbar province of Iraq. There was a enemy TTP started where they would go and rig different houses with explosives to kind of catch people coming in who are setting up like maybe a sniper team or a reconnaissance team setting up a hide site because you're operating these cities and you're there for a long time. There's only so many places you can hide and go into, right? So they were sort of booby trapping, right, these homes, right, with explosives, and which is obviously something you see in any type of warfare. You see that
Yeah.
stuff. But then, what people came up with was like, grabbing a can of that silly string and spraying it in there because even middle of the night under nods you could spray it, and then you could see if when it fell was there like a tripwire or some obstruction there. So there's like a very simple low calorie way to detect something like
Yep.
that. And then I remember this one specifically because it became a big push, and then people from the US were trying to ship it to silly string over because they needed it, and then it was getting difficult to do, and then there was like almost a little mini public outrage about it, like, why can't we get this is so easy to get over there, and you're not supporting the guys on the ground. And the
Right.
thing is, though, once that stuff gets there, by the time that happens, like the TTP has changed. The enemy's doing something else.
Right.
So we get into this loop sort of chasing those things. So I'll give a brief explanation of what I mean by that. And here's sort of what I think happens. And so when we're faced with some new novel circumstance, and I want everyone listening who think broadly about this, it could be a school shooting, a new way to steal a car, break into a house, a new business tactic, a new product, a revolutionary technology. I'm using that in air quotes because
Yeah.
everyone calls those things revolutionary, and then it ends up not really having as much impact as we think. But it could be a new drug hitting the street. Insert whatever problem you seem to think you're facing, and what we do as humans, we analyze it. We do some sort of breakdown of the event or person or situation, and that could be whether mentally right there in the moment, or that's on a YouTube commentary or a full blown after action review. We do some sort of analysis, but the problem I see with some of the commentary and analysis of these problems is that it either has a strong bias for some, simple proximate cause. Oh, you know what? He was fired from work, and that's what led him to do this. Okay. Or one people pick a strong bias for some, a single contributing factor. Greg, he was abused as a child. Okay. And these are oversimplified ways of looking at an
I
issue.
agree.
It doesn't take into account the fact that the world is a complex system that interacts with you every time you interact with it.
That and it changes frequently. So you've got more than just you interacting with it and it interacting with you. There's other people about,
So
and there's different, the poles are shifting and all this other stuff
so what
that nobody ever
happens?
takes into account, Brian.
Right. So right out of the gate, we
Yep.
fail at the initial analysis, and
Right.
we'll unless like you're the NTSB, we'll get to that example later, right?
Yeah, I love them.
But so we're kind of fail right out of the gate with this analysis. So then when it's trying to figure out what to do about this, right? We often apply some sort of technological solution to the problem. So it becomes this kind of algorithm of stimulus
Yep.
response, right? And so rather than getting ahead of the next TTP, we get really, really good at whatever the response is. And because we're innovative people and people will work really hard and people are really smart and they want to come up with a detailed, sophisticated, well-funded answer, that's exactly what we do. And the problem with
Yes.
these answers is that they typically only solve one single math problem. So
Yep.
rather than creating an algorithm or a set of problem solving tools that will allow us to solve many problems, we focus on just this one thing that may no longer be relevant in the near future. So the idea is, rather than building a calculator that solves a number of different problems, we create the
Yep.
greatest calculator that only does division, and then another calculator that only does subtraction. And then rather than truly testing our calculator, we use ends justification to show that our new model that we developed actually worked.
Right.
So, Greg,
And additionally feed information, spurious and scurrilous sometimes information into it to support it.
yes.
What is that
Well,
called? There's a bias that's
yeah.
associated, right? So
So I just
confirmation bias
real quick, Greg. I just
screws.
want to end
Yeah.
with this is kind of like
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say with this, and sort of what we're talking
Right.
about today is I'm actually telling people to take your advice, Greg, and your advice
For
is
the first
actually
time. And
to listen to the words
yes.
of a young North Shore High School student by the name
Yep.
of Regina George, who
Yep.
said, "Stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen."
Precisely. And you know why? TTPs are quickly adopted and even more quickly forgotten. And we want to talk today about why they don't work. Well, let's do this. Let's look at the 30,000-foot level: tactics, what you do; techniques, how you do it; procedures, how you do it. Well, you know what's not in there? The why. All right. And we love to focus on the how, but there's
Yep.
not the why thinking behind it. So on Monday, hours before the anniversary of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and hours before Valentine's Day, which anybody that's ever listened to you and me, Shelley Martin, or our podcast knows, danger warning, Will Robinson. There's
Significant
things
dates. Yep.
that could happen, right? We had Anthony Dwayne McCrae in East Lansing walk onto the Michigan State University campus, and shortly after 8 goes into Berkeley Hall, fires some rounds, killing and injuring, then goes across the hall to the Student Union, which is a very popular gathering place at that time. Remember, it's Michigan. Remember, it's winter. It's been dark for hours, and it's
Yep.
wicked cold and wet. Okay, and so he goes there and fires more shots. And then I think it was in present memory recollected a few hours later, around 11:30, sometime after 11, they say, "Hey, this is our shooter." Local citizens who know the guy said, "Hey, he's over here." They go and he shoots himself. So what? So are we just another podcast that's going to talk about the shooting? Now, what we want to talk about is the TTP. And first of all, we've got skin in the game because Ariel Anderson and Brian Fraser were from Grosse Pointe Schools, and that's my brother Brian's wife, Lynn, is very close to that. We don't want
Yeah.
to get into that because it takes us off the point. You know what the point is, Brian? That this was a black male, which doesn't fit the algorithm. He was
Right.
43 years old. Wait a minute, that doesn't
That
fit
doesn't
the
fit.
algorithm. He goes to a school he's not associated with. That doesn't fit the algorithm. It's at night. That doesn't fit the algorithm. Brian, I could go 5
So
more, 10 more points that there are books written, courses out there, and people that testify on CNN every day about how you follow this algorithm, you'll be able to spot the
so
shooter.
so
What happened
so
here?
so we need to go study this and do a new algorithm and write a book about it and
Yeah,
create
yes,
courses
and again on late night shooters or
on coffee
whatever else.
tables.
Yeah, exactly my point. And this is what we're trying to say. If you have a good set of rules, Pythagoras, and that rule can be applied to more things than just the one thing that's in your hand that you're staring at, then you're probably coming up with something good. And I'll give you an example of how the old Greek saying, very old and very Greek, Pythagoras, the shout out there, Erasmus, you too.
Yeah.
But let's think of gosh damn, I always get it wrong. El Paso. I can't imagine why I get El Paso wrong. But there's so many places in Texas we've taught, so we know El Paso pretty well. And there's a mall in El Paso hours after the shooting in East Lansing that has a shooting too. And guess what? Journalists rush to the point and say, here we have an active shooter. They didn't have an active shooter. We got two gangs of kids that started firing rounds at each other. It's a random, spontaneous event that happened to take place in a mall. And so everybody starts responding in kind, thinking, oh, this is what we do in the lockdown and the run, hide, and fight. The idea is you have to have a basic overarching philosophy on how to deal with situations in extremis and situations in progress. And if you don't have that, and you don't hypothesis test, and you don't rehearse, you're gonna fail. It's just that simple. So and I go way back to Brown versus Board of Education. Segregation is a bad idea. Post-Civil War, what did we spend all our time trying to do? Dismantle segregation, right? Dismantle all the laws that now we look back and say there was no equity. There was no chance for certain people of color to advance. And so what does Brown come in? Brown and four other capers that went on in the 50s sat there and said, hey, these are really shitty ideas. Let's pile on the fuel and make them even dumber, right? So you got the Supreme Court. And you know how much I love the Supreme Court?
Yeah.
What's the role of the Supreme Court? To reach in and slap you on the forehead and go, wait a minute, take a step back and take a look at what you did, right? So Justice Harlan comes up and says, hey, there's this thing called the 14th Amendment that's really pretty important. And he made one of my favorite quotes of all time. Our Constitution is colorblind and neither knows nor tolerates classes amongst citizens. Now, you're going to have people right now listening to this podcast. Yeah, it's not true. SCOTUS is this, and we voted in Republican. Now, we're talking about the Constitution.
Yeah.
We're talking about humans that are interpreted the Constitution. Well, wait a minute. Has that ever happened? Do we have Jews that spend their entire lives reading the Talmud? Do we have Arabs that spend their entire lives, taking a look at the Quran and saying, no, this is what it means? Brian, we've got a long, rich history, which means that there's probably precedent, for doing what? For taking a look at ideas and saying, this is good and this is bad. So let me throw just one more at you that just happened weeks ago. Okay, now you got Arizona, and Arizona passes House Bill 2319. So it's still in the socialization stage. And what does it say? It says police officers have the discretion to decide whether they want to be recorded from within 8 feet. The law specifically says it's unlawful for a person to knowingly make a video recording of law enforcement activity if the person making the video recording is within 8 feet of where the person knows it reasonably.
That's not
going to go. How could it?
Okay, it's not going to go anywhere.
So, wait a minute. Isn't there an amendment that says you have the First Amendment right?
Yeah.
First of all,
police
are not exempt.
No,
they're not private. Their actions are the most public of actions.
Well, that's the thing. It's very well established that you have no reasonable expectation of privacy when you're in public. You do not.
Exactly.
You are in public. That's different in your house or someone's house or at different locations. But when you are in public, someone can record you. They can't harass you or assault you or battery,
or
but they can. Yeah.
So the law here. Somebody from Arizona is going to call and go, hey, the entire purpose of the law was to prevent interference with law enforcement officers. Yeah, that's true, but that's not what it's being used for. It's being used to prevent that and prevent videotaping officers. And the First Amendment clearly protects that. And so you can't do that. And so somebody's going to go, well, that's not what we meant. Yeah, I don't care how well-intentioned your idea is. The idea is that I'll say one last thing and get off of my rant. Brian, these are why TTPs don't stick around.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm teaching at the FBI National Academy. And all of a sudden, a student stands up, and he's a very famous student. I'm not going to name him. And his dad is a general, and I'm not going to name him because both of them have been in the news a number of times. So what I'm talking about is I'm talking about attention. And you know how we do that in class, what you attend to and how you can become overwhelmed by events or overcome by emotion. So I'm going through that thing, and I said, hey, because this is how long ago it was, I said, this new fascination with texting, okay, is worse actually than talking on your phone in your car.
Yeah.
And your divided attention is going to lead to more accidents, more fatal accidents, more loss of work because people are going to be sitting at a light. You're going to have to beep for them. Then they're going to rush through. And this kid raises his hand, this kid we're talking about, and he goes, well, how can you prove that? That's ridiculous. There's no scientific basis whatsoever for that. Well, first of all, okay, my job is predictive analysis, so blow me. Second thing is, how do you feel now? Would you like to go back on the air? Would you like to come on the
Yeah.
podcast? Because you know what happened, Brian, is he looked down and in with 3 rules that he himself invented and only searched tabloids for information that supported him. That's when TTPs fail. It's a knee-jerk reaction. We try to rush in and put gauze on something
Yeah.
before doing triage, before assessing what this might mean. And we don't have to overanalyze it, but don't we have to take a look at some of the
So
unintended spirals of an event?
So, that's what I got into and why I kind of said that right up front is, what becomes, we don't do analysis very well. We do
Right?
commentary. There's very few
Oh,
places
that's true.
that do analysis really well. Like, so if you're an investigatory body, like, you rag on the FBI all the time, but
All the
like
time.
when they build a case, what
The best in the world.
they don't go to, they don't arrest someone until they have an airtight case and know
Yep.
this is going to lead to prosecution. They're going to jail. They don't waste their time unless it
Exactly.
because it's so detailed and it takes so long, right? It's the same
Yes.
thing. A great example that I know you've used before in class too, the NTSB, National Transportation Safety
Yep.
Board, when there's an accident, a plane accident, they come in and they recreate it. They rebuild that plane. They look at everything and they study it
Yes.
and they test it and they identify they find what was the proximate cause. And then they look at every contributing factor that led to this event happening. And what they do, there's a great one that I know you always talk about. Might as well talk a little bit about it here. But the idea was they didn't say, okay, it was the plane manufacturer or this thing was faulty. It was, hey, you know what? It wasn't this pilot's fault. He
Right.
wasn't trained for this situation. And if
Right.
you're in a situation that you weren't trained for, that's not your fault. Great. If you can,
It's a
if you,
crapshoot.
well, you could either be Sully, right? And you'll land
Yes.
that plane in the Hudson,
Yes.
right? Or you're going to be someone who doesn't have his 30 freaking years of experience on that single airplane.
So
And
Freeway Baptist Church had both, though, Brian. Let's go there
yeah,
for just a second. Freeway
Jack
Baptist
Wilson.
Church had Jack Wilson, who is Sully, in the audience. And people in the audience all knew something was going to happen. The woman that was taking
Yeah.
communion that said, hey, listen, I love it here. This is a great place, but we're bailing because something's wrong with this guy. Sully knew it. He started moving in close. Jack, the people were talking about it on the security people on their
Yeah.
in-house
In the
thing. And
cameras are
guess what?
watching. Yeah.
They still waited to the shooting. Why? Because analysis paralysis sets in. A TTP becomes a mantra that we throw up there to save us, like 5 and 25. Check your 5s and 25s. Okay. Well, there's a TTP, kinda, that's going to live forever. Why?
Because
Because
it's
it's
so
better than,
simple.
yes, it's better than keep your head on a swivel. It says, I'm coming out. I want to check my
Well,
5 meter and
yeah.
25 meter because that's where the likely danger is. So I'll buy that one, and that one's going to have long legs. But I won't buy the keep your head on a swivel because it's word salad. You
Well,
get what I'm
and
trying to say?
what happens is this. It's like you give the example sometime of when we talk about organization and sophistication and about
Yes.
stealing a car. And the example you use, like that the specific TTP is not really relevant anymore in terms of that type of vehicle. But that's not the point. We're not teaching the
It
TTP, right?
isn't the point,
But here's the thing. That way it went from using the spark plug with the
right?
you get the porcelain tip to
Yep.
bust out the vent window, get access to the vehicle, make a small hole in the column up on
Crack the
top,
column.
and
Exactly.
you can gain that. Well, that same thing works, but now it's like the Kia boys where you need literally a USB cable
Right.
to
But
jam
everything
into
up to
the
that point is
ignition. It's
identical. Yeah.
identical, right?
Right. And then it's the only thing is that small thing changed the TTP, which sent all previous TTPs up in smoke. Yes.
Yeah,
So
and so
come on.
the other idea is it's like okay, you I can either go out and build a detector that detects what the precursors or something to methamphetamine, right? So I want to
Yes.
find a meth lab. I can do that.
Yes.
Some type of drug lab. I can also go out and build some sort of sensor for the same thing for a bomb lab, right?
Yeah.
Because there's certain things that need to be there. But there's also a whole bunch of stuff that I don't need to know shit about how to make that,
Yes.
that I need to know to use that. Because if I understand what a double boiler is, right?
Simple
Or
always works.
what cooling and venting and heating is, I can put all of those things together and
Yep.
go, well, yes, I'll find that in my kitchen right now, but I won't, it won't look like this. It's out of place here. So
Yes.
understanding it, it's not a TTP of these are the things I need to look for, because guess what? When we were teaching that, that was before anyone knew what fentanyl was. But
Exactly.
will that same system work to find
It'll apply
fentanyl?
for
Yeah,
anything. It'll
that's the
apply
thing.
to find a lost
So
kid.
so
You see what I mean?
what we're talking about is we come up and we over engineer solutions,
Yes.
and it's well intentioned, it's just poorly done or poorly executed. And people don't want to believe this, but like, I've seen teams of really, really, really smart people who work really, really hard with a lot of funding create shit that
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Like, that
Right.
really truly doesn't matter. But when you're in the trenches and you're working on a problem and you think you're coming up with gold, like, and you're pouring your heart and soul into this, it's sad to see that, because you're like, this isn't going to help the situation, and you're
Yep.
pouring all these calories into it. And we've seen that before. Tech companies do that stuff all the time, and they all rally
All the
around
time.
like, oh, we're going to do this, and you're like, yeah, your stuff blows. This doesn't solve any problem.
Well, we had a conversation this week with an entity that we admire, that their basic thumbnail was to start tabula rasa, start all over again to try to catch up with the competition. And
Yeah,
Brian, that's a non-starter,
yeah,
right? But when you're so close, you can't see it. So I would be embedded with EOD early Iraq, right? And EOD hated me because I wasn't a trained EOD guy.
yeah.
And they were like, well, what are you doing? What are you here? And they would tell me about the Red Russian dead cord and the feet per second for this and that. And I go, that's great. But I'd say the place that's building this bomb is close by to where we are. And they would go, well, how do you know that? And I go, well, have you ever had your wife? That's my dog playing with the. So if you hear that in the background, that's not my stomach. Have you ever had your wife or husband or whoever your significant other is try to take a cake, like a wedding cake, a long distance to a wedding? Okay. Or have you ever tried to
I actually
carry
do know some.
something like
Yeah,
eggs
yeah,
and you're
yeah,
trying to
yeah.
carry them into the kitchen? Okay, so here you got a guy that's carrying something that's illegal, and it's not only illegal, it's highly explosive. And it's not only highly explosive, but if it goes off, it's going to kill him. And if somebody sees him with, they're going to kill him. So how far do you think that person wants to go? And Brian, how long do you think they want to be out there and placing? So people make mistakes. And they go, well, what you're doing is you're kind of putting a human touch on something. And I said, no, anything a human touches puts a human touch on something, and you can read it. So guess what started happening, Brian? We started creating code TTPs. They would talk about the Italian landmine, and I would talk about the technique that the person used and how they would repeat that technique over and over. And now that TTP changed, didn't it? Because you had subject matter experts chiming in on what types of things to look for. I remember being on the Tigris and Euphrates, and they had hundreds of the fly fishing rods that were shipped over from
Yeah.
America. And they're going, why would these guys buy this? And it was like, well, low metallic signature pressure plate. And then everybody goes, oh, shit, because they didn't see it. Why don't you see things? Because you're too close. And then guess what they did? The TTP list came out and said all
Right.
fishing
And
rods are
that's
bad
and
and
then
dangerous,
what do?
right?
We target that one thing versus
That
looking at
one thing.
how people do, how it's done, or we don't look at, the behavior associated. What are the things that we need to look for?
Exactly.
It's here's this one thing we need to find right now. This is the big issue.
And by the time they printed that warning, Brian, the people knew that they had confiscated the fishing rods, and those rods were no longer
Well,
relevant to TTP.
it's the drug smuggling is the same thing. What
Yep.
had happened this past year around Halloween, and all these photos go around about
Yep.
there's fentanyl candy and stuff coming through. And
Yep.
what's the real story? Okay, well, some dope smuggler tried to smuggle drugs into the country, and they used
Right.
a candy thing to mask their movement in. And what
Yep.
did people take that as? Oh my God, they're going to be drugging our
Every
kids.
single
And it's like,
one.
what first of all, drug dealers don't typically give out free drugs to kids and pass it around
Yep.
like candy, because one, they're trying to make a profit, right? Right? And they
Yep.
don't want to get caught. It's like we come up with these ridiculous boogeyman theories,
But we have to. That's the precise reason why TTPs fail, is because most TTPs that we've seen are based on fear. And so you're dealing with the
yeah,
fear, not with the problem. You're dealing with the human,
Yeah.
not with the situation.
And
So a good way of thinking about situation awareness, which I coined and stole from the computer industry, is call it something different. Because in psychology and human behavior, it's called omnidirectional vigilance, right? And what that means is that you're attending to your environment very clinically, okay? And it's a great trait, and you can practice it, you get better at it. But you know what's not sustainable is hypervigilance. So these people that are out there that's saying watch this and watch that and have all these TTPs, Brian, we know what channel capacity is. You
well,
can't stay
your
hypervigilant for very long,
your
or something's going to fall off.
your a TTP is not set in stone. It's the best way when you right because you need to have tactics, techniques, and procedures at your organization,
You
right?
have
Doesn't
to.
matter what it is, you have to have them.
Yes.
The problem is we get married to them and we think this is what I've got, this is what
It
it
will
is. And it's like,
apply to every employee
well,
in every
and
situation.
the thing is, it's just the best way. Well, hopefully, it's the best way you know how to do things right now.
Yep.
That's it.
Yes.
That's going to change. Those are constantly in
Right.
flux. And so if you're still trying to do something, from 1997 and it's 2023, like, I'm sorry, it's outdated. It's not going to work. So you can't look at, and the point I'm making with this is the TTP isn't the answer, right?
No.
And and
Let me
so
caveat
I
that.
can't just
Yep.
be so focused on this process of how I do things because it's going to fail you eventually.
Brian is exactly right. And take a minute, pull over, grab your yellow pad, and write this down. So we've conducted so many vulnerability assessments. And when we finally get around to talking to their security chief or their head of security, everybody's got a different title and a different name for it. We say, hey, we want to see your policy and procedures manual. First of all, they have to go find one. Second of all, when they find it, it's a dusty old relic that they pull out and they go, we were just updating this. Brian, how many times if we had a
Yeah,
dollar for every we could retire, right? And the idea is that what they do is they say it's in writing, so therefore it's occurring. Well, that's not true. That's not true a bit. So how long did it take simple things like seat belts to take hold? Okay,
right.
we know seat belts save lives. We know it's a great idea. And then what did cops do? I remember what cops did when it started becoming law and everybody had to enforce it and everything. Cops were like, yeah, but that's for like civilians. We don't have to wear them. And then the agencies and departments, right, started coming. Well, because UPS guy and me, as a cop, Brian, I get out of my car too many times, so it's inconvenient. The problem is you can't have it that way. You have to have techniques, and procedures. For example, a fire drill. Okay, and a technique, and procedure is the laminated sheet in the seat back when you're on a plane. Hey, this is a best case scenario
Yeah,
guideline
yeah,
to how to do the oxygen and the flotation
right.
device and all those other things. Okay, so it's topical and it covers many instances, but you have to use critical thinking to go further with those. So you can't use it as a Bible verse and cast it out and think that it's going to work for everybody in every situation. And that's why I called those. I wrote you yesterday about that LinkedIn post about the douchebags that were writing about the MSU caper, and all of them are saying everybody should carry guns. Every kid should be mandatory. We have the training. Come to us. We could have fought our way out of this.
But
Kiss my ass.
well,
Every situation is dynamic and developing. You
yeah,
can't have a
eh,
rigid
you can't
standard
have
for any of them.
this one standard rule. That's the always thing, and we don't understand as humans. We don't understand probability and statistics very well. We're not wired that way.
Right.
It's got to be right
Right.
in front of our face because it's a
That's
very simple. That's a very simple math equation. Like I don't care what your stance is on guns. It's
yeah.
very simple. The more guns that are in a environment in a
Right.
situation, the more likely someone is going to get shot. It's just
Yep.
that's simple math. It doesn't matter what it is. It's like the more people you have in a crowd, the more likely someone in that crowd isn't going to like another person in that crowd. It just the possibilities open up. So adding
Crisscross
more
said it best.
as a very
Mac Daddy
simple
make you jump. Yep.
a very simple thing of well just let's give everyone guns. It's like okay, but now you open up the whole someone accidentally doing something, someone
Yes.
this happen. Like it's just it's such a simple stupid solution. Like that doesn't that's meaningless. It's worthless. It's junk. It's like there's no analysis
So
right
how do
there.
you
It's like
feel about
hey,
that?
this
No,
is
you're
well,
exactly
it's like
right.
this is the thing right here in front of my
Yes.
face. That's the problem. It's like okay, like the headache might not be a problem. You might have a fucking brain tumor. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's like, no, I got a headache. It's like, no, you have a brain tumor that's
So
causing the headache.
would you? Yeah. The old joke was straw in the glass. Hey, when I go like this with my glass, my eye hurts, so I would take the straw out
Yeah.
because it's usually the simplest thing. So I would tell you, if you're listening to my voice, that playing Sudoku, playing World of Minecraft, or I don't know any of these games, doing all those different things, even first-person shooters, are going to make you smarter and faster and harder to kill. Anything that
Hmm.
takes you to the cognitive gym and makes you expend some mental calories is going to improve your thought process and your cognitive agility. Now, there's accelerated learning where
Yeah.
we go to the cognitive gym and we show you. Brian was nice enough to get me the Sam and the Marine workout, and I did that from my birthday all the way till Christmas. And I lost weight and I felt stronger. Why? Because I had somebody standing there yelling at me, and
Yeah.
and somebody held me to task, and I had to complete those things. When you do that, no matter what it is, Brian, you're increasing your intellectual acumen
Right.
for unknown situations. Why? Because just standard rehearsal, like this fallacy of the 10,000 repeat behaviors, right?
Oh
No,
God.
let's go
10,000
back to the
hours.
core of that.
That's not
Yeah,
a
kiss my
scientist
ass.
did not come up with that. A
Exactly.
journalist did,
Exactly.
or an
What,
author
what
or writer
happens?
did.
What happens is if you repeat a behavior, you get better at that behavior. Now that means public speaking. That means Marty Cohen's pro practice. I love the analogy. Marty wanted to build something for the banking industry that was like a tennis machine that shot the balls at you, and you got better every time you return that serve. That
Yeah.
makes sense, Brian.
Yeah.
So you've got to also relegate it from muscle memory skills, which means a procedure that you do,
Hmm.
to being cognitively agile, which I talked about just a minute ago. And what is cognitive agility? Cognitive agility is when faced with new, novel, or incoming information, you're able to use your tacit and experiential knowledge to leverage a likely answer that will likely work. Likelihood is the key there, right? But
Yes.
is it going to work on every encounter? Certainly not. And so anybody that tells you it will is full of shit. Having a gun in this situation, so many things would have had to come to light. And I'm talking about the
Yeah.
MSU situation, Brian.
Yeah.
You'd have had to been close enough to the shooter. You would have had to been tuned in that he was actively shooting. You would have had to be able to outshoot the shooter. You get what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say? And
There's
all
a
of those factors. Come on, it's like getting hit by an asteroid burning in. And you just happen to be on your bike at that day, at that time, turning left.
well,
Come on.
no, and this is why, when I look at a solution to a problem, right? So a problem can be, if I look at a problem and I say the solution is a series of decisions, right?
Yep.
It allows me to say, okay, I have choices, and I might not have the best choices in these
Yep.
situations, but I have choices nonetheless, right? But meaning what it does is I can then mentally say, okay, wait, I can influence the outcome. I can influence the situation. It's
Yes.
not, because it gets you out of this idea of, okay, what's going on now? Okay, now we need to do this. What is he doing now? Okay, let's do this. And it's like
Exactly.
if
Exactly.
if they have the momentum, if they have the initiative, they're like you're always behind it. And I feel like societally, that's how we just do things on scale at
We're
scale.
chasing it again.
We're
Yeah.
chasing everything rather than trying to get ahead of something. And so it becomes like constantly the same thing over and over again, where people fail to anticipate any other thing that could potentially happen. There's one, the video just came out now. It's an off-duty Chicago police officer, and she ended up shooting. I think the guy died. I just read it kind of when it came out and saw the video, because she was off duty, went outside of her apartment where she lived. There were some people arguing, or whatever. So she tried to go out there, de-escalate it, and get people, hey, get out. And most of the people left, and then one guy didn't. So she's trying to go back inside, and then it's on video. He basically kind of attacks her, sort of goes for a gun, starts to wrestling, and
Right.
she's trying to handle him. She's like, and she says over, "I'm gonna kill you if you keep. I'm gonna kill you." And then she gets her gun out, and like, I mean, this is like at like contact shot, like very close, like shoots him a couple times, and he's like still talking to her and still going, like he's like, oh man, and he's apologizing, but he's not giving up. He's still got his
Yes.
hands on her. He's not running away. He's not going back, anything. And she's still saying, like, I told you, I told you, I told you. And then, it escalates from there. And I don't want to get too much into it because it just came out, but you could see the video. But the idea was like, everyone goes, well, okay, this guy attacked her. Yes, clearly. It's like, but did she fail to anticipate the fact that she's going outside to break up an argument and that things could spiral wildly out of control?
Right.
Like,
Right.
I
And
mean,
if a gun wasn't present, There
Well,
certainly is one now.
yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's there. You gotta. Everyone wants to watch and break down the video and have their shitty commentary. They
Yes.
don't ever wind the tape back, and they don't ever wind that tape back and go, "Well, how did this situation come to be?" Because
And you're
that's what
always the protagonist, Brian.
oh
So
yeah, we're always the
this is the
hero in
other
our own
part. Yeah, you
story.
have to be
Yeah.
the hero in your own story. So you saying folks, I've been in so many after action reviews and debriefs, two completely separate things, where I've seen Shelley or Brian step up and go, okay, we're going to start with me. This is what I did wrong. And I love that approach because it's like, okay, now we, mea culpa, we got it on the table, we can get past it. The idea is that what you need to do is be more of a paramedic in this situation,
Okay.
and think, is it better now, the pain, than it was just a second ago? Is it getting better or is it getting worse? What are the things complicating me, obstructing my airway, causing me to bleed? And what I mean is not that application in a first aid sense, Brian, but in the situation you're in.
Yeah.
Okay, did I just step into a rapidly situation,
Yeah.
unfolding situation, or am I causing it?
So
Okay, is me staying escalating it, or can I leave? Right?
and
Those
yeah,
are the
yeah, no, no,
questions
and
we need
you're
to
getting
rehearse.
you're getting right into it, and
Yeah.
this is how our approach is to situations and a lot of the different concepts that we teach. And
Right.
it's not a tactic, technique, or procedure because most people get very procedural training, so they become very
Yes, they
procedural.
do.
When I see this, I have these options. Then I can call for this. This person now escalated and are within a distance from me and did this thing. So now I have option C or D I can choose from as well. And it's like but it's not. So what we offer a lot of times, because you just started to sort of bring it up, is
Yep.
my question to you then, Greg, is then, well, what can I do? If it's not a
Yes.
tactic, if a tactic, technique, or procedure isn't always the answer, because I still need those, but
Right.
it's that's an answer or a tentative one or
Right.
a one for specifics. Like, what are these general things that you're talking about? And
Exactly. So critical thinking is key here, because I take you back to the cognitive gym. So I've got a number, and I'm not going to be able to think of the names of the things right now, but I've got a number of things in the house, right directly behind that wall that I'm staring at, in our pantry in the home office here, the family truckster, that are specifically designed that if you have a reaction to something, that they'll slow the reaction enough, so you can get to a hospital. Neither Shelley and I are allergic to anything, but I still have the EpiPens on the shelf. I have the drinks that metabolize the poisons, the
yeah,
Ipecac to throw them
yeah,
out if you have to, and we update them by date and we throw them out. Why? Because in the 13 years we ran the ranch, and the 27 years we were a cop, and in all the times we were forward, those are the things that if you said, "Oh my God, you know what we could have right now would be this," right? And that thing, Benadryl,
oh yeah,
Benadryl as well. You just never have enough of that stuff around when you need it, right?
yeah.
And the same thing with a PFAC, a personal first aid kit, and a personal first aid kit with something as simple as tweezers. Do you know how much tweezers help
So
in a
okay,
situation?
so you're saying we all need to
Simple.
go out and buy tweezers, and that'll help.
No, and I'm saying
I,
you have to look at this. I'll give you an example. You know how much I love Shelly. Shelly and I go antler hiking all the time, and so we'll stop for a power lunch, and simple shit that Shelly packs that are fun and rehydrate you and keep you mentally focused, because we're miles and miles from the vehicle and we're in an arena of mountain lions and bears that could eat and kill you. So those type of situations where it's you against the environment, you against a terrorist, you against a criminal, you literally have to do smart things and you have to repeat those good behaviors. How many times have we done an evaluation on a place, Brian, where they blocked a door open that was a fire door or a security door? And we saw that just, I won't say that we were in St. Louis, and we looked at a couple of places, but the idea is that we were. And guess what? Smokers were the worst offenders, Brian. What did they do? They blocked those doors open. They went out for a little bit, and they violated all security protocols by doing that. I'm in Colorado. People don't like to be cold. So when I pull up to the Safeway or City Market, there's nobody in the car and the car's running. And it's like, okay, well, then don't call me when your car gets stolen, right? So if we willfully, who's responsible for your own personal safety? You are, largely you are, and then society, and then the police and everybody else, right? But the idea is if you walk around and don't look where the security cameras are, if you walk around and aren't mindful of the exits, if you take your Christmas stuff and put it next to your water heater and your fucking house burns down and
yeah.
you don't check the lint screen on your dryer, Brian, who's responsible? So the idea is I would rather play in a realm where there's simple rules that apply, like gravity is a simple rule. Okay, entropy is a simple rule. So the more I understand about the science, the better critical thinker I am when something comes up to me that's novel, nuanced, or an external arousal that surprises and shocks me. I'm better way to think my way out of it, not shoot my way out of it.
Yeah, and you're talking about still some of them sort of like TTPs of
Yeah.
simple low calorie things, but I kind of like this is why we use a lot of what I would call thinking points, right?
Yes.
Something that you can apply to any situation, no matter what it is. So it's not about the EpiPen or the Benadryl or something. I'm talking about did what you're really saying is did you have do you have the tools you need if these situations may arise, and did you check them?
I'm saying one more. I'm saying
Did you check them
one
though?
step to the
Like,
left of him, Brian.
yeah.
I'm saying, have you imagined what tools you will need in a situation? I'm not even saying going out and buying them. I'm saying that the thought game that you should be playing every day is what tools might I need today and where would I find them? That's the first stage, right?
No,
Then what you do
yeah.
is you start coming up with the tools. I totally agree with you,
So
but I'm saying we have to think even further left of that.
like we use one, and let's say you're sitting you're sitting in a restaurant, or even better, you're checking out at that you went filled up your car with gas, you're inside, you're buying some energy drinks, some Rippets, some whatever you
Rip
got,
it.
some snacks, right? And you got the little hot dog that's been out on that roller all day long, whatever it is, and you're checking out,
Exactly.
and you got someone up there who's at the counter, and he's mouthing off to the person working there, or something's going on, right? And one of our things that we use is like, does this person want their say, or do they want their say and their way? And the idea
Yes.
is, meaning, is this person just complaining that they're being overcharged for something, or pissed off because this or that, or is there some other intent behind what this person is doing? Or is it just someone
Yes.
complaining to the manager about their food, or are they going to go out into the parking lot, get the gun out of their car and come in shooting, right? Those are different. But that's a simple thinking point, okay, to understand a situation. But what do most people do? It's okay, they apply a tactic, technique, or procedure. Okay, I'm going to set this stuff down, I'm going to gain distance, I'm going to pull my concealed weapon out. It's like
Yep.
you're already creating you're making a situation occur, right? You're already
Of
creating
course.
an outcome before you ever took a look at the situation to determine what was likely happening and what was
Yep.
going to happen next. So what
Yep.
you do is you then influence yourself, and you influence the environment, and it pushes right back on you. And now, man, that train's heading down that track, and there's another one coming at another one. They get to
Yep.
that intersection, right? Right. So the idea
And it's faster and it's harder to solve.
and
And
you sped it up.
exactly.
You
Yes.
sped it up. You, as the person in
Your
that
mere
situation.
presence created a conundrum. Brian, I hate to use Gregisms, but folks, if you're listening again and you got your kid in the car, look at them and go, today, I want you to understand the difference between acting up and acting out. A person that's acting up is no problem whatsoever. They just want their say. They're just pushing you around a little bit to get a rise out of you. The person that's acting out or about to act out, that's the most dangerous player on the battle space right now, and you need to address that. And sometimes, Brian, addressing that is reverse, and sometimes addressing that is leaving, and sometimes addressing that is calling 911 and having the one finger hanging over the button. Those are the type of TTPs we're talking about. Those visits to the cognitive gym will make you smarter, stronger, and harder to kill. But do we get that in a CCW class? Do we get that when we go to these tactics, booting doors and ramming cars and using explosive entry tools? We don't. We don't think about those, and those are much more important factors because you learn from each trip down there, even if that trip is solely in your head.
Yeah. So I have I have a cousin he's much smarter than me, and he's a little bit
Okay.
older than me. But he's a
You looking for
a
work?
think no, it's a like kind of like, well, we'll say think tank kind of guy,
Yeah.
and spent some time, working in Virginia. So shortly after 9/11, he was at a very important meeting with some very high-ranking people,
Yes.
and they were sitting around in the room, right? Because obviously, 9/11 had just happened, so people were going, okay, trying to come up with potential or likely scenarios of something that happens again. And this person who was running the meeting, who was a very important general, was doing the okay. We gotta stretch our minds here. We got to come up with creative ideas, right? I want people thinking outside the box. What other possibilities are there? Do we have any other buildings that we think they might do this to? And like he like slapped himself in the forehead, going
Yep.
like that that you missed it. But the immediate thing was, okay, what
Yep.
other buildings do we think they might likely attack
Yep.
next? And it's like, no, we missed that one. It's so unlikely that that's ever going to happen again because we've created that now defense of it and covered the seams of gaps and created this. It's like, but a bunch of smart people, who do that for a living fall into that cognitive trap of this
Of
bias of just
course you
going,
do.
here's what it is right in front of me. And I just think that's such a powerful, analogy for exactly what we're talking about here. Does
Brian,
that,
Brian, we talk about you're spot on again, and the idea is how many times have you heard me rail that people still die from drowning, and you've
yeah,
heard me say that 1,000 times this year so far to different crowds and everything, and people miss what I mean by that. Yet last weekend in Michigan, 3 guys died ice fishing because the weather changed, the ice broke, and they drowned. They couldn't stay survival floating until somebody got them out of there. And Brian, those are the things we're talking about. If it's as simple as not putting high value dollar items visible inside your car, locking them in your trunk, how simple is that?
yeah,
Taking a rain jacket when you go hiking in Colorado because you know the weather's going to change, and if you become hypothermic, you're likely not going to survive the situation. If you don't have a Camelback, where's your canteen or where's your alternative water source? And if I'm drinking one, I'm going to hand you one because I want to make sure you think about it. Brian, those are great policies and procedures or TTPs that you can instill in your kids and in your family, and they work anywhere. They work at school and they work at play and they work in combat. That's what we're talking about. I swear to God, I would love to do a situation. You know what? We got to do a podcast on zombie apocalypse and the last of them and all that other stuff and show how quickly society can erode. And why will it erode? Because, first of all, we could do it from the psychological aspect of why people want an apocalyptic event, but we could also do it by who is going to survive. People think they're going to survive because they're more resilient. Resilience isn't enough, Brian.
yeah, you have
Resilience
to
isn't
have,
enough. There are
yeah,
entire resilient societies that are
yeah.
no longer on the face of the planet because they died out because they repeated bad behaviors. That's the idea. You have to learn from those behaviors, Brian. You can't keep going in. Look, if you're an IndyCar driver and you keep driving at very high speeds, sooner or later you're going to crash, and your crash is going to be much worse than my crash because I drive like a grandma, and when I'm not driving, you're driving. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty good there, you know. So the idea is that the sooner that you understand that critical thinking is a much more important skill than a shooting skill or a combatives class, right? And we're not saying not to go to those classes, but we're saying if you don't exercise your mind and visit the cognitive gym, you're
Well,
doing yourself a disservice.
you could avoid some of that, if you're outthinking the situation. I
Of
mean, that
course,
that that that's
the
simply the
essence of
fact.
tactical
I mean,
cunning and tactical patience. The
that that
essence.
that's the whole point, is that
Exactly.
why that the martial arts thing or the fighting
Yep.
is a perfect example, because every 10 years or so it changes on what it should be and everyone should learn. And so right now it's jujitsu and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and it's like, dude, which is
Everything
great,
else
it's
is shit.
awesome, it's
Yep.
awesome, right? Don't get me wrong, but dude, I don't ever want to be on the ground fighting someone, ever.
Right.
Like, if I've
Right.
failed, I have failed at that point.
And
I've
then
failed
somebody's
every
going to
other thing
dial
before
in
that.
and say how many percentage of the
Yeah.
fights end on the ground.
Yeah.
Look, you know what? Every martial artist that's at your level or my level or a very high level has come to the same conclusion. Avoidance
Yeah.
is the best mitigation
Yep.
tool because anything can happen in a fight, even if you're the most highly
Yep.
trained individual on the ground. I remember back probably 35, 40 years ago, there was a martial artist on the East Coast that got convicted of molesting and raping a young girl. But there was others in the dojo that made the same statement. And so the guy was coming through an airport, maybe Pennsylvania, and it was back when surveillance cameras were horrible. So this was a TV camera crew that was getting the guy coming off the plane and coming down, and he was
Oh
in
yeah, yeah,
handcuffs in
yeah,
front.
yeah.
You remember that one? It's
Yep.
very old. And the father of the molested girl walked out of the crowd with a big ass 357 and shot
Killed
the
him.
guy at
Yeah.
point blank range. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. If you know you're failing to anticipate that situation, there were so many points for intervention, and that was a highly classically trained martial artist that could kick a lot of ass. But in that situation, on that time and that day, guess what? The balance, the seesaw, was against him. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. What you need to do is you need to think, what are the 3 to 5 things that I can do today to make my
Yeah.
life
Well,
happier
and
and more fun,
it,
and
it,
places I should avoid and
it's
things I
it.
should
It's
do.
it's the 1 to 5 things I would say.
Yeah,
What's
okay,
the
I
what
agree.
meaning what's the one thing I can get really, really good at that I can use all the time? And
Yes,
it's
yes.
like, we're not making fun of the different shooting courses. I'm taking an example.
No,
It's
no,
like,
no,
oh,
no. There's a lot of good ones.
we've got CQB, and then, oh, this is vehicle CQB. Oh, this is this C. It's like, well,
Yep.
wait a minute. If the basic principles of what I should learn don't apply in a number of different situations, it's not a good TTP. It's not a good way to do things. And it's like, um, so I have an interest in how the world works. So in my free time, I read up a lot about nerdy shit and physics and
Okay.
math, and I'm just topically, because I don't fully understand it, right?
Hilarious.
But I try to topically understand it at a theoretical level. To go, okay,
It's a
I get
cookbook.
how that works, right?
Right.
So the idea is I could sit here and I could try and learn everything I can about math and everything I can about physics and all the different laws, and really deep dive all this stuff. And you could spend your whole life doing that and really still not learn everything. But if I just go, all right, there's this thing called pi, right? 3.1459. It's a repeating number that has no pattern and never ends. And
Yes.
if I look at that and understand its significance in the entire world and universe, it actually, just learning that one concept makes all of the other stuff easier to understand. And I
Yes.
don't have time to learn everything. And my point is exactly what you just said. What's the 1, 3, 5, whatever it is? What's the things I can do in every situation, right? That will help me no matter what it is. And if I get really, really, really good at that
Yeah.
and really good at applying it, well, then I don't need a new TTP, or a new TTP will become obvious and apparent for use, right? It will
Exactly. I love that.
it'll become like,
Inevitable, actually.
yes, and,
Yes.
and I don't have to think about that. I don't have to put time going into,
Right.
man, how do we address this?
Right.
That answer I will arrive at the most logical conclusion because I use this one thing in all of these different areas of my life. And
Yep.
that's it. I just focus on that one thing, and everything else becomes easier. And so that's kind of what I was trying to get at with all of this.
The
Is
Heimlich maneuver. Okay. There's
yeah,
a procedure, a
yes,
TTP, that you can learn quickly and easily and have in your back pocket your entire life for that moment that you need it. That's what we're talking about. And what Brian is saying, folks, is that understanding centripetal
yeah,
versus centrifugal
centrifugal.
force,
All right,
okay, is an important consideration. Caliber of the weapon system that you're going to buy is a much less serious consideration.
right.
Brian, Guns and Ammo magazine has been around for so long because all they do is argue calibers. 308 too much for the
Still,
mule deer,
still,
whatever, right? And every week it's something else. So I've
yeah,
got a blunderbuss that I feel
yeah.
okay. That's all great,
If
but what's more important? Understanding terminal ballistics.
yeah,
Do you get what I'm trying to say? I mean, and what do I need to know about terminal ballistics? Wow, if I get shot here, I better stick my thumb in there right quick so I don't leak out. That's what I'm talking about with that psychological and cognitive triage that we have to apply to a situation. Is it better now? Did I just walk in on this? Holy shit, has this been going on for a while and now I'm another potential victim? Those are the type of situations that you got to run. And if you do that, you'll be smarter and harder to kill. And that's a mental tool rather than a physical tool. Now,
yeah.
are we
It,
counting out physical tools? No,
no,
because every single place that I go, we go in and we buy or rent a box cutter or a
yeah.
knife for the
You
week that
just
we're there because
because
we
it's a
need
couple
one and we
bucks
can't.
and it's easy, and you
Exactly.
can yeah,
And we
exactly.
leave it to somebody and give them it, and hey, congratulations, you're our best student. And they're
Yeah.
still thinking that that was a special night. They don't understand that we just need that son of a bitch, right?
Sometimes we steal it too. We don't
Yes,
even
of
pay for
course.
it now. So,
Really crappy WalMarts we do.
so, so
Serves them
no,
right.
no, and that's the idea. You kind of said it. It's a cognitive tool versus a
Yep.
physical one. It's
Yep.
a thought a you know a thought pattern versus a tactic, technique, or procedure. And if I
Yes.
focus on those, it's where can I use this, in how can I use this thing in every situation. It
Yep.
makes it easier, and I get better at it because I use it more often, right?
Yep. Yep.
It's the geometry of fires or geometry of thought. I mean, whatever it is, like I use that with my family all the time. I go, well, what about from this angle? What about here? Did we cover all of our communication? How are we doing that? So it's not
There's
just operationally, it's just with the family. I mean, it's really,
there's a amazing story about geometry of fires, Brian, and it dates back a long, long time, and it'll separate some of the people in the audience right now that didn't know a factoid. So we were given the choice on where urban hunter, which turned into combat hunter, should reside. And the choice was made by the Marine Corps, not by the subject matter experts, that the best place to put it would be the SOI School of Infantry on the East and West Coast. That way, they would be the retainer of the information. Well, knowing Mattis during those times, and Mattis was an integral part of standing this program up and seeing it pushed viciously and aggressively into the Marine Corps. Was Mattis's 535 that changed many, many times. Well, the three were Guardian Angel, Geometry of Fire, and then Unity of Command, understanding that whoever's in front of you, it's a gosh damn corporal, drive on, follow that person because they're the leader. Well, the Guardian Angel came from us, came from Combat Hunter, and the Geometry of Fires. Why? Because Geometry of Fires made sense in my brain that you want a 360 with optics, info, your weapon systems, right? And so we went to the East Coast, and the East Coast guys kept coming up and going, that's not what geometry of fires is for. And atmospherics is this band of oxygen trapped around the earth. And I'm like, look, I'm a Detroit kid. It's atmospherics, the sight, smells, feels, taste of an area. And it's geometry of fires, 360 from the ground to the roof for all these different things, right? And then they fought and fought. So then we went back to the West Coast, and Mattis goes, hey, what do you call that in class? I go, that's geometry of fires. He goes, that's it. So that became one of the three
that's
in
funny.
the 535. So Mattis did that over and over throughout. Mattis liked settling arguments by settling scores, right?
Yeah.
But he did it by outthinking people,
Yeah.
and he and his chief of staff Crusher would literally crush the wind out of your lungs if you failed to do it. So
Yeah.
those type of things became part of that 535.
Sure.
And Brian, why is that 535 mentality still around? Because like the Greeks, it was a great idea. Now that Greek guy might not still be around, and we're not using those same letters except on the outside of a academic institution, right? But the principles, that's what we're talking about. The philosophy is as strong and smart as it is today as it was then. And so you could use Mattis's 535 tomorrow at school and be smarter and safer and harder to kill. But people want to tangentialize their thinking to think that if the application of the tool is sufficient, you don't need to think, you need to react. And that's a fallacy.
Yeah,
That's not going to work for you.
there's always going to be better, tools out there that people are going to build. People are always
Or a
going to
stronger
rapidly
person,
innovate. Yeah,
or a better
yeah,
fighter, a faster car.
that's consistent. You know what? I
Yeah.
think for that, the 535 you brought up, that's a throwback to the Marine Corps stuff. We'll do
Mhm.
that. I think we'll do that on the Patreon side for those
Oh,
listeners
you
who are
know what? That's a
pa
great idea.
for people who are the Patreon subscribers. We'll go ahead and cover that on there. So don't forget, if you are listening, we have that. So we'll do that. And you know, I think I think people are kind of getting seeing the point we're getting at here is, if I don't have those simple thought processes in place to go over everything, none of it, the new gun, the new shield, the new non-lethal device, the new technology, the new chat GPT isn't going
Yep.
to solve the damn problem or revolutionize the world. It's
Nope.
stop looking for that thing and start using the
So,
thing, because I can use those everywhere,
and look everywhere. So we use a lot of airplane references because we love the
fly.
NTSB and the
And
way
we
that they
fly a
think,
lot.
and we fly all the time. So the two things that I would say I could categorize that pilots are most afraid of, based on our interviews with them, are lithium burns from batteries that not in the cockpit, but in the where the luggage is stored, because they burn so fast and so hard, and are really hard to put out, even with the systems that they have there, the Halon
Hmm.
systems. Second thing is high speed tire blowout on landing which changes the trajectory of the landing. Now, I could go on, but understanding those two things, Brian, uh, where's your battery stored at home? Uh, will you know with an alarm system if it burns while you're up sleeping in bed
Yeah.
or down working out in the gym? Well,
Yeah.
that's a consideration that anybody could make, even in a hotel room, right? And what about on a car? Do your kids know how to change a tire? Do they know where to pull off on the roadway? Do they know what it's going to feel like when one tire goes out and it starts exploding on the roadway and how you control it? And should you hit the brakes, Brian? Those are skills that
Yeah.
transcend everything. And if you take a few minutes a week on those, you'll be harder,
So
faster, stronger,
So that's a good one.
harder.
Real quick at the end, a funny one I did with the insurgent on January
Yeah,
1st on New Year's Day. So I was kept talking to her. It's like, oh, we got lot going on New Year's Day. We got a lot going on. And so finally, it's like, when it happened, when it was New Year's Day, it's like, well, what is it? I go, oh, today's the day you change all the batteries in your smoke detectors, right? And she's like, well, looking at me like you're an idiot. So wanted to get her involved. I was like, look, what you do
yes,
is on the first of every year, you do these things that you only do once a year, and it's just very simple. You can get a list. So what I had her do is we took the couches we have like three cushions on it, three big
right.
cushions. I go, well, it's the first year, so we want to rotate those cushions because we consistently sit in the same spot and we don't want to. She's like, oh, okay. So now she starts doing that. I got her going on there. So she's all excited because she loves decorating, doing all that stuff. So she's
That's
switching all the
great.
pillows on the couch. I go, now we have to remember we start from here and we go this way and we do that the same thing every single year so that it consistently rotates. She's like, oh, that makes sense. And now she's got the little step stool out to help me, get up to the smoke detector to change that stuff out. So it's hilarious. But like those simple things
That's
now
it, though.
trying to just implant in her head the first of the year. I talked up January 1st so much she probably thought that she was going to get like a gift or something big
Exactly.
was going to happen.
And now
And
she's going, it's another one of these insurgent training events.
but
I hate my dad. Right.
she'll
Yeah,
never forget it, right? So she'll
totally agree.
always know January 1st we change the couch cushions and replace all the batteries in the smoke detector. You know what I mean? It was
Every
something so
family
stupid.
member in my family, meaning Shelley's family, because my family is a demented rat stranglers, they would call being sent to Colorado for Shelley training. It was called Cowboy Boot Camp.
Oh,
And
I love
everybody
it.
still
Yeah.
talks about Uncle
Yeah.
Shelley. And Uncle
Aunt
Shelley's
Chili.
gonna, she's gonna, no, no, it was Uncle Shelley because we joked so much when they were kids that it was Uncle
Yeah.
Shelley and Aunt Greg. We have to go out to Colorado, and that's called the Cowboy Boot Camp. We don't want
That's
to go
so
there.
cool.
So yeah,
That's
and so
cool.
but listen, thank God we all have kids that are not skulking and lurking around and doing horrible
Well,
shit.
apparently your family are rat
We don't want
stranglers.
to even
That's
talk about
that's a
that,
new
Brian.
that's a new
Brian, I love both of my brothers, but
they're
I just
completely
don't know.
insane.
They're both insane, and you know
And
both of them.
oh,
So
and so they're turning around saying the same thing to their
about
family and
who?
friends.
About yeah, exactly to them, but not about their Uncle Greg.
Oh,
So,
oh, of course
no,
not.
hey, I love your Patreon idea. Let's do
Yeah,
that.
let's do
Let's
that.
and then real quick question. I know we're traveling again. What
Yeah.
about part two on Clark Deaver?
Yeah,
Really
we'll
enjoyed
get
that.
we're gonna get to Clark schedule with him. I want to get another one of our normal episodes on in between there because I want to get some feedback from folks. So if you listen to
Perfect.
the Clark Dever, Greg. If you listen to that episode, I said it wrong too. I don't even know how I did that because I knew it was Dever, and so but anyway,
He can
all
say
good.
whatever it is, but then he's got to change the spelling. He's got to put Devehr with the little schway on it.
Yeah,
So I love
yeah,
Clark. I'm sorry,
yeah.
Clark.
He's great. But if folks, if you had questions about that one or were interested, we want to cover a bunch more, and like we had a bunch of things we wanted to cover with him, and then as the kind of conversation went, I was like, shit, we should have done like one or two of these. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
Because you
yeah,
can
yeah.
really deep dive it. But that was a great one. So and everyone listening right now, we really appreciate it.
We do.
Please share the podcast with your friends. We got a lot coming up this year in terms of stuff that we're going to be putting out.
Yeah.
So you got to stay tuned, stay signed up at the Arcadia Cognerati website. Again, follow us on Patreon. If you're going to be on Patreon, you get the first sort of first go at everything we have going on this year. It's going to go out to you folks who are on there
Woo-hoo.
and get some discounts for some things we have coming up if you're interested. So definitely, it's only a couple bucks a month, and we put out a bunch of stuff on there. And when you write in and ask questions, we will just record it and answer it right on there for you, and let all the Patreon subscribers get it. So if it's something you're not concerned or a little confused about or want some more information on, hop on there, shoot me a message, and we'll get to it. So
Yep.
anything else to add in, Greg, before we
That Brian's going to be
get to
giving
work?
away random shit from his background, his office,
Oh, that's a good idea.
all year long.
I got the
So
Hoberman. Can you see? You can't see the Hoberman sphere. It's not the top
uh,
shelf. It's the one right below it, right
that's good.
there.
That's
The
for
Hoberman
people that
sphere.
are
Uh,
zooming in right now to see that. No, that's great. But Brian will be auctioning off that painting back there too. So
Yeah, that's my
ready for that.
Chicago painting. I
I know
picked up
it's
at the,
lovely.
yeah,
I
it's
love it.
anyway. All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Don't forget that training changes behavior.